Half square triangles are a very versatile patch called for in many quilting patterns. Because the long side of the triangles are going to be cut on the bias, you run the risk of it stretching when it's sewn. With the method I'm about to show you, that can be avoided, and they are very easy to make in bulk. First, you must determine what size patch you want to make. In this project, I want to make a patch that is trimmed to 3 inches, so I'll start by cutting my strips 3.5 inches wide. I also want to make 12 half square triangles. Since I will get 2 from each square I cut, I will only need 6 squares cut at 3.5 inches. So 6 times 3.5 equals 21. Therefore, I'll need a 3.5 inch by 21 inch strip of 2 different fabrics. Next, we're going to align the strips right sides together with the raw edges even. Then with a ruler, we're going to mark vertical lines 3.5 inches apart. With an appropriate sized ruler, you're going to find your 3.5 inch marking on it. And then take that line and align it to the raw edge of your strip on the end. And with a pen, mark a vertical line 3.5 inches. Move your ruler down, align it with that line at 3.5 inches, and continue to mark your entire strip until you've got all of the vertical lines marked. You can use any kind of a pen because these lines are going to be cut, so you don't necessarily have to use a washable pen for this. Once you have your vertical lines marked, next you want to mark the diagonals. So take your ruler and align it diagonally from one corner to the other. And every other block you want to do the diagonal in the opposite direction. This will make it easier to sew once you get to the sewing part. So continue down the line, alternating the direction of your diagonal line until you have all 6 of your blocks marked. Once you've finished marking your diagonal lines, it's best to stabilize your strips by pinning them together. Next, we'll go to the sewing machine, and you'll want to use a 1/4 inch foot. And you'll want to align the edge of the 1/4 inch foot next to the diagonal line that you drew. So you'll go down one line, and then you'll turn your fabric, and keeping the line on the same side as your foot as you've just done, you go back and forth on all these diagonal lines. You want to go all the way over to the edge and then turn it, and then keep on sewing until you've gone down the entire strip. When you get down to the last square on your strip, then you'll want to turn it around, and you're going to sew on the other side of the line. So essentially you have 2 sewn lines, a 1/4 inch from that center diagonal line that you've drawn. And when we get done sewing, then I'll show you how to cut them. But for now, you just keep on sewing down the opposite side until you've gone down the entire strip. Once you've done sewing the diagonal sewing lines, take it back to your cutting board and remove all of the pins. The first cuts you're going to make are along the vertical lines. So align your ruler on those vertical lines that you drew that are 3.5 inches apart and cut them all apart. And then you'll have 6 3.5 inch squares with diagonal lines sewn across them. So now you have these squares that have a sewn line on 1/4 inch on either side of the drawn line. So the next thing you want to do is to cut on that drawn line. So lay your ruler down from corner to corner and give it a cut. and you open it up, and now you have your half square triangles. Continue to cut your squares until all of them have been cut in half. Alternatively, if you want to make a large quantity of half square triangles out of the same two fabrics, you can use 2 fat quarters, or any size yardage for that matter, and draw your lines as shown on this diagram. Start by determining the size of your block that you want and add a 1/2 inch. Draw your horizontal and vertical lines first to that measurement. Then draw the diagonal lines. The red lines represent your first sewing pass on one side of the diagonal, and the blue lines represent the second pass. Then cut the straight lines first, and then the diagonal lines as already have been shown. Next, you want to take it to your ironing board and press them. I recommend you press towards the dark. In my particular instance, it really didn't matter, so I just chose one and pressed it towards the blue. And so I press on the wrong side to get it started, but make sure you turn it over and press so that there's no lip on the other side and it lays nice and flat. Next, you want to trim your half square triangle. So you take a square ruler and you look for the 2 ones that are in a corner, and there should be a diagonal line across the ruler as well. And then you also look for the measurement that you want to trim to, and in this case it'll be 3 inches. So next you want to lay that diagonal line down across the diagonal line of the half square triangle, making sure that your 3-inch mark is within the edge of the fabric on the bottom, and then trim off the excess on 2 of the sides exposed. Once that's been trimmed, flip it over, line up your diagonal line once again, and this time you want to put the 3-inch mark on the raw edge that you just trimmed, and then trim off the excess fabric on the remaining 2 sides. So here you have your trimmed half square triangle ready to be sewn into a block. Continue to do this with the remaining ones until they're all completed. Now they're ready to be used in whatever manner you want in your quilt.